This is Paul Amendment number 2. This amendment would eliminate the position of Director of the National Institute of Allergic and Infectious Diseases and divide the responsibilities into 3 separate directors for allergic diseases, infectious diseases, and immunologic diseases. Each of these directors would then be approvable by the Senate. Advances in science often happen when we question conventional wisdom. History gives us too many examples of what happens when people in power make scientists bend to dogma. At the end of his life, Galileo was kept under lock and key just for telling a scientific truth that people in power, the government, didn't want to hear. Luckily, we don't have the Inquisition anymore, but we do have scientific elites who don't want their opinions to be questioned. A good example of this was the emails revealed between Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins, where they talked about taking down their political opponents, having an enemies list, and trying to squash opinions they disagreed with. This is not the role of someone in government. This is a role of someone who needs to be separated from government. When elites like this hold the purse strings to all federally funded research in a certain field, grant applicants aren't likely to voice a dissenting opinion. A scientist's job is to experiment and test a hypothesis and scrutinize the results. But if certain assumptions can't be questioned, scientific breakthroughs won't happen. Cures and treatments will go undiscovered, medical advancement will be slow and incremental at best. According to their mission statement, the National Institute of Health exists to foster fundamental creative discoveries, innovative research, strategies, and their applications. This is a noble goal, but during the current pandemic, it's been undermined by the structure of NIH itself. Of the 27 institutes and centers within NIH, one has come to overshadow all others, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. The jurisdiction of NIAID covers everything from asthma to Ebola, from peanut allergies to the plague. And the director of this institute has been sitting in his position for 38 years without ever being approved by the Senate. Imagine how much has changed in the world since Anthony Fauci started in his position. In 1984, the internet was 1 year old, Prince and Madonna were at the top of the music charts, and Steve Jobs had just released the first Apple PC. It weighed over 16 pounds. The one thing that's remained the same over all this time is Dr. Fauci, at the head of the most powerful institute at NIH. The emails that have been revealed show him to be a petty, partisan politician who's not above taking down his scientific enemies, not above having an enemies list. This is someone who really seriously needs to be separated from government. My amendment will make sure that no one person can hold that job for generations with no accountability. It divides the NIAID into 3 different institutes, one for allergic diseases, one for infectious diseases, and one for immunologic diseases. This aligns with their current mission to better understand, treat, and ultimately prevent these types of diseases. The directors of the 3 new institutes will be appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate, and serve for 5-year terms, but they can be reappointed. This will provide the accountability that's sorely lacking at the NIH today. I ask for your support. In the 1940s, Congress passed a bill giving the CDC power over quarantine. In that bill, they included language that was vague and ambiguous to allow the CDC director to utilize other measures as in his judgment may be necessary. No one would have guessed that these vague words, what they would have been used for, but they've been greatly expanded during this pandemic.
Senator Paul, if you could identify the number of your amendment.
It's Amendment 1.
Thank you.
In the early days of the pandemic, many so-called experts predicted a tsunami of evictions if the government didn't step in. Some even said there would be 40 million people on the streets. Never mind that these fears began because of government interference in the first place, nationwide lockdowns that caused layoffs across the country. So the CDC decided to do something unprecedented and suspend every residential rental contract in America. Their orders said that this was necessary because evictions threatened to increase the spread of COVID-19 as they forced people to move, often into close quarters in new shared housing settings. The law they cited as authority was written to quarantine people back in the 1940s who might spread certain contagious diseases. The law contains a catch-all phrase, and other measures, that the director can utilize other measures as in his judgment, his or her judgment, may be necessary. The CDC decided to stretch those words to the limit. The Supreme Court rebuked this overreach last summer in a per curiam opinion that stopped enforcement of that order. The court said that the plaintiffs were virtually certain to succeed on the merits of their argument and that the CDC had exceeded its authority. So what happened next? A study this winter by researchers at Princeton showed that even at their highest point after the moratorium ended, evictions were still almost 40% below historical averages. It's good to know that we didn't end up with 40 million new homeless, but was it ever reasonable to think that that was going to happen? Should the government take drastic actions like stretching the law to mean things it never meant before, all to prevent a disaster that was completely theoretical in the first place? Who suffers when the government can freeze rent collection on a whim? It's not just the landlords. If any emergency can mean rent collection stops, who in their right mind is going to take in tenants? Certainly not small landlords who rent to folks with low incomes or poor credit. Those small landlords need a reliable income to pay their own bills. As rental properties become harder to find, prices will start going up everywhere, and then the most vulnerable people, the ones the government is trying to protect, will get priced out of the housing market. My amendment will stop that from happening. It simply strikes the catch-all phrase in the statute to make clear that the CDC's quarantine authority is for public health, not rent control. I ask for your support. And I ask unanimous consent to add Senator Tuberville as a co-sponsor.